As we get closer to the 2024 election, Joe Biden has the worst approval rating of any post-war president. And I'm no Joe Biden superfan, but I seriously have to ask why. Well, if you've ever tuned into Fox News since his inauguration, you would be greeted with this.
Could a Biden economy ever approach that in the middle of a pandemic? Of course not. Because with no credible plan to create jobs, Biden could only use the empathizer-in-chief approach while trash-talking school reopening plans.
Don't think about it, assures the Biden administration. We've got a female Treasury Secretary. The critical diversity component of American economic policy has been covered. Rest assured.
According to this Gallup poll, the percentage of Americans who believe economic issues to be the nation's most important problem has gradually risen since 2020. And for a while, to an extent, academia agreed. It almost seemed as though the consensus of economists at the time was that we were careening towards a recession similar to that of 2008. According to Bloomberg, there was a 70% chance of a recession in 2023. However, that did not happen. From 2021 to 2022, the inflation rate reduced from 7% to 6.5%. Then from 2022 to 2023, it was practically cut in half to 3.4%. And this year, it has continued to drop with a current rate of 3.1%. Yet, nonetheless, the reporting is still negative. And if you watch any interview with your average Americans, you'll likely see this.
It's a very obvious answer, Trump.
Why?
Biden has destroyed our economy. You look at the gas prices, the border, inflation. A lot of liberals like to have arguments based on emotion.
Who are you voting for, Trump or Biden?
Trump. I don't really care for either. I just want a good economy, to be honest. Trump had the economy pretty stable, so I'm not gonna...
Yeah, gas prices were like way lower and all that, right?
Yeah.
That's the #1 thing I hear people talking about, is the reason why they're voting for the opposite party is because of the economy.
I mean, yeah, have you seen his approval ratings, bro?
It's pretty bad. Like, you can't
argue.
argue.
It's the worst it's ever been for a sitting president, bro. Like, what?
You can't argue the fact that, under Trump, the economy was way better. And then, like, all the, these last 4 years, it's been a dumpster dive. You can't not see that. And so that's gotta hurt the sitting president's chances of re-election. You know what I mean?
That's right, bringing the gospel to gamers, grittying on 8-year-olds in Fortnite while calling them liberals. Say what you will about Joe Biden's presidency, and believe me, I certainly have, but I really feel like he's saved us from a recession. However, despite all this, the economy is far from perfect, and even Joe Biden's legislation to curb economic downturn has been far from perfect. For example, the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, an $891 billion climate change bill, which included many provisions such as fighting the carried interest loophole, a 15% corporate minimum tax, and Affordable Care extensions. One of the elements was the climate change part, which included incentives for homeowners, and consumers in general to adopt green energy in the form of rebates and tax credits. However, these perks are only as effective as the amount of Americans who know about them, which seems to be minimal. A poll from the Washington Post University of Maryland found that a majority of the participants disapproved of Joe Biden's climate legislation, and that there was a correlation between people that knew little to nothing about the Inflation Reduction Act and disapproval. Additionally, climate experts have criticized the final version of the Inflation Reduction Act for relying more on incentives to entice voluntary adoption rather than penalties to enforce pollution cuts. These penalties should hopefully be enforced on industry and the military, as they're by far the largest contributors to climate change, as opposed to the average American. If we want companies to pay their fair share, the penalties for fossil fuels should be much stronger on them as opposed to incentives for American citizens to get solar panels or drive a Tesla. Economist Kyla coined the term Vibecession and has an excellent article on the topic, which I strongly encourage you to read. Essentially, nobody really knows how inflation works, including banks. And because there are so many things that can be blamed for inflation, this sets our expectations of how the economy should be. In addition to this, there are many people cheering on a recession with the hopes that it will allow them to get ahead politically. These factors create our expectations. Then there's theory, what economists are saying, and largely how things are supposed to be. Then the reality, the actual house, gas, and food prices that we end up seeing in our day-to-day lives. And these three factors create our narrative on how we see the world. And the collective narrative of Americans sets the vibe, or consumer sentiment. And despite its very colloquial name, vibes matter. When expectations, theory, and reality don't match, that's where things start to get confusing. This graph shows expectations versus the present situation of the economy and only goes to 2023. These vibes, or consumer sentiment, can actually have tangible effects on the economy. Here's a graph of Google searches for recession from 2004 to 2022. If people are constantly being told by the media that there's a recession bound to happen, they'll ask for raises at their job, raise the prices of goods and services, and cut down on their spending. All this has an actual impact on the country's GDP. This is why the Vibecession has been called a self-fulfilling prophecy of sorts. However, it's not the only thing steering the economy in one direction or another. It all comes down to the idea that it's very hard to come to a conclusion about the health of an economy in the present moment. Everything from unemployment, GDP, inflation, the deficit, the national debt, the market, and many other things all culminate in different ways to make our economic state. So any conclusion made by anyone, from Jesus-loving Fortnite players to the World Economic Forum, are all, to an extent, a crapshoot. It all reminds me of the Ron DeSantis and Gavin Newsom debate, which, to summarize in one sentence, was two non-statisticians interpreting statistics. But the sentiment is getting better. Here's Kyla with a newer video about our economic vibe.
It wasn't a recession, it was a vibe session, and I'm thrilled to say that it's over. The University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Survey reached its highest level since July 2021, and the survey is a measure of the vibes, scientifically speaking. We've mostly adapted to a new normal, and it seems like the vibes have too. Things are just looking much better. Inflation expectations are falling, which is great news for the Federal Reserve, and the worries of the self-fulfilling prophecy of higher prices. Income expectations over the next year are rising too, the highest in the dataset going back to 2002. And income after inflation is higher as well. People are hopeful about the future. And the best part is the optimism is broad. It's across age groups and income groups and across both sides of the political aisle. This is the Vibecession, and you can see it in more than just this survey. It's coming on the back of strong retail sales, 6 in 10 workers getting raises larger than inflation, 63% of Americans rating their current financial situation as being good, home ownership for millennials rising to 55%. How people feel about the economy and their economic prospects really matters. When we talk about the vibes, it underscores this idea. A big economic secret is that expectations are all that matters, and the Vibecession and the subsequent Vibecession show that. People are the economy, and the vibes are good again.
I'm a firm believer that it's way more impressive to say a complicated thing in a simple way than a simple thing in a complicated way. And I think she does that amazingly well with the economy. I just wanted to give her some extra credit because I used a lot of her writing for research of this video. But getting back on track, we've added 353,000 new jobs in just the last month, over double the estimates. Wages rose to 4.5% year over year, again higher than expectations. And the unemployment rate has stayed under 4% for 2 years running. Here's a compilation from MSNBC of some recent reporting about the economy from a familiar media organization.
If you own your home at a low fixed rate mortgage, 3%, and the value of your home is going up, that is wealth accumulation. And you have a fixed rate mortgage, you have a fixed payment every month, and your wages are increasing, that is extra spending money. That's how you benefit from inflation. And people are out spending. And the messaging from the RNC has been way off base.
Falling inflation and rising growth gives the U.S. the world's best recovery. Steve Forbes with me this morning. I think the Democrats are going to run with that headline. I mean, they're just going to plaster this all over the place. But are they right? Does America now have the best recovery?
Well, yes. We had a blowout jobs report, more than twice the consensus expectation. Now, I know many of my conservative friends are trying to drill holes in this report. But you know what, folks? It is what it is. It's a very strong report. Mea culpa, I was wrong about the slowdown in the recession.
Thanks to MSNBC for making it so I don't have to pull another all-nighter watching Fox News looking for clips. You just saw Larry Kudlow giving the game away. They can't beat around the bush anymore without blatantly lying. With the increasing clarity that the economy is not as bad as Republicans are saying it is, they've been pivoting to the southern border. And as we covered before, the Democrats were able to successfully call their bluff with the strictest border security bill seen in a long time, and that still ended up getting shot down. The economy can ruin re-election chances for largely fine presidents like Jimmy Carter and George H.W. Bush. On the other side of the coin, it can greatly help a president when it's in their favor, like Bill Clinton, who rode the tech wave of the 90s while having little to no impact on its happening. Despite the improving vibes, I believe that the damage has largely been done to an extent, and I believe that many voters will still be set in their ways.
No, I totally don't like anything to do with politics anyway. They're all a bunch of liars that don't, you know what I mean? I just don't have nothing to do with politics. I think he's the worst president we ever had, to be honest with you. But No, I'm not. This economy sucks. I mean, everything's going up except, paychecks. I just think the economy sucks. Ever since Biden got in. Go Trump.